Hello, I am Jeremy Fair, and I'm a graduate student in agriculture, leadership, education, and communications. For my final project in the ALEC 552 class, I'm going to talk about leading change. I'm going to concentrate primarily on two organizations that I have worked with. I'm in my teaching career, the two FFA chapters, two school systems that I have spent the most amount of time in. I taught in one for 4 years, and I'm currently in my 6th year teaching in the other. So I'm going to concentrate on those two organizations as I discuss leading and developing change and using the 8-step process to do that. The first step in this 8-step process is creating urgency. And as it was described in the text, this creating urgency, most often we can think about breaking a sense of complacency. I think about when I first began my teaching career. I came into a school that had not had a very active FFA chapter and had not had a very consistent teaching program, had not had a very high level of instruction going on there, and complacency was pretty rampant. And so as we began to try to rebuild that program, rebuild the Ag Ed side, as well as create a successful FFA chapter, one of the biggest hurdles that we faced early on was breaking that sense of complacency and breaking through doing things the way we'd always done them. One thing that kind of helped to do that, and one thing that I concentrated on, was taking a group of young students and really pouring into them, putting a lot of time and attention into them, because I knew that was going to be the future of the program. I knew that freshman class that we began with was going to be one that was going to be the future leaders of the program. They weren't tainted, if you will, by the indiscretions of the previous leadership. And so we made opportunities available to all students, but we really put a lot of time and effort and energy into that group of freshmen because we knew that's where the future of the program was, and if we were going to see the change that we wanted to, it was going to be because of them and because of their leadership. As a teacher, I would say that's a group of students that I'm very proud of. Lots of students in that class have found success in their own ways, in different ways. There are future, I say future, but there are current business leaders among that group. There's a future veterinarian who's in vet school at UT Knoxville right now. There were teachers, current ag teachers in that group. Business leaders, young man in there has began his own business, establishing an implement company. There's a young lady in that group who is now a florist and running her own business. And so very proud of that group of students. But to really start this change, the first step is to break that complacency, and that's how we went about it in that program. If I could give any advice to a younger teacher that was in a similar situation, I would recommend something along those same lines of finding that group, that core group of students that's going to be your future, and really putting time and effort, energy into them to break that sense of complacency or idea of the way things have always been. Step 2 in this 8-step process is forming strong coalitions. You can't go it alone. If you're going to see this successful change that you want to see in a program, it's not going to be something that you can do by yourself. It's going to take a concerted effort from lots of people. And that's one thing that, again, if I could offer advice to younger teachers, I would say to build coalitions within the school, within the community, and within your students. As an ag teacher, we have to work within the confines of the school. That's in the NAA creed, that I will be a productive member of the school, and we have to build those coalitions among other teachers, among our supervisors, among our principals, We know that for FFA events and activities, we see that students miss school a lot, and so building those coalitions is going to help with that. Building those coalitions are going to help you as a teacher. You're going to find that lots of things that you're teaching, you're not the only one in the school teaching them. Chemistry concepts, biology concepts, math concepts, and you can really lean on those academic teachers to help you out in providing instruction for those. It's going to be important that you build coalitions within the community. One thing lots of folks are going to tell younger teachers are to establish an FFA alumni program and build those connections with the community. And I think that's very important as well. Those community connections are going to help you. Those are going to be people that are going to offer support to you. They're going to be advocates for you. They're going to be people that are going to come into your classrooms and into your programs, and that are going to be able to provide you with resources that you wouldn't have otherwise. And so building that coalition within the community is going to be important. And I think equally important is building that coalition among your students. Think about the program that I'm teaching at now, and how many of your students really have your back, so to speak. There's a lot of loyalty there from students to teachers. There's a lot of mutual respect because we've created that environment, or the environment was created before I got there, but the environment is there, the coalition is there among those students. They're proud to identify as an ag kid per se, and they're ones that are really helpful in leading change when we want to see change. Those student leaders, that coalition of students, really helps motivate their peers and motivate other students to buy in and to help us achieve that change that we want. The third step in this 8-step process to creating change is developing a vision. And a vision is a picture of what we want the future to look like, a visual representation of where we're going, of the program that we want to establish. And think that, you know, maybe this is one of the key parts in creating that change, but it's also one that's kind of hard to conceptualize and to put into words. But we've got to create that vision. We've got to create what we want the program to be, so that we can motivate students to help us get it there. Characteristics of an effective vision are this: imaginable, one that conveys a picture of what the future will look like; desirable, appeals to the long-term interest of employees, customers, stockholders, and others who have stake in the enterprise. In this case, our students, our community leaders, our school administrators. Feasible, one that contains realistic and attainable goals, one that's really something that we can achieve. Think back to that first program that I started teaching in, and we had to really kind of pick and choose what we were going to do because we knew where we could find some success, and I'll get to that a little bit more later. But at that point, there was no comparison between us and a 5-teacher program that had an established history of success over a sustained long period of time. You had to develop attainable goals, realistic goals, and you knew that you couldn't go toe-to-toe in FFA events with a program like that. You had to find other ways to create success, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that when I get to some of the later subsequent steps in this process. This vision has to be focused, clear enough to provide guidance and decision making, and then it's flexible. It's got to be general enough that it can be adapted, that students can be able to adapt it, that you can adapt it as you need to, because things are going to change. So the vision has to be lots of different things, but it has to be one that we can create buy-in. And that steps us down to step 4, which is communicating that vision. Within step 4 of communicating that vision, a great vision is only a great vision if it can be communicated. If students and community members and industry stakeholders and school administrators and all those people that are involved in creating this change in an ALEC program, if they can't see the vision, if it can't be communicated to them, if they can't see what you want the program to become, then your vision's pretty much useless. It's got to be one that you can communicate. Sometimes visions fail to be communicated because managers under-communicate them. There's an understanding, or you think there's an understanding of what they know and they don't know. And then also through inconsistent messaging. We got to make sure that when we're trying to communicate the vision and instill that change, that we're consistent in our messaging toward all of the people that are involved, students, administrators, community leaders. There's some steps that we can take to help make that vision one that can be communicated, and those are outlined in the text, and here they are. Keep it simple. Simple vision is one that's easier to communicate and easier to understand. Use metaphors, analogies, and examples. Those help to create buy-in and help to create connection between you and the people you're trying to communicate it to. Use different forms. So just like when we talk about instructional methods that different students learn differently, using different forms to communicate the vision will be helpful. Repeat, repeat, repeat. Repetition is going to lead to comprehension, and that same is true with our vision. If we repeat it, we're consistent in our messaging, it's going to be communicated easier to those that we wish to understand it. Leadership by example. This is one thing that we preach to our students pretty explicitly, is to lead by example, and we need to do that as well. Address inconsistencies, and lastly, listen and be listened to. So hear the concerns of your stakeholders and communicate to them in a way that they listen to yours as well. Step 5 is removing obstacles and empowering those around you. And that's one of the major things that we see in communicating our vision of what we want our ALEC program to look like. When we talk about we want to have a premier program that embodies classroom instruction, FFA involvement, and helps those students grow and develop and come out as well-rounded, successful individuals that are going to be able to transfer the skills that they learn in high school to jobs and careers and everyday life after school. When we talk about that's the vision that we want our program to achieve, one of the major ways that we don't get there, one of the biggest obstacles that we see is students' lack of knowledge, ability, and confidence. Their lack of knowledge, ability, and confidence is one of the major obstacles and hindrances toward us achieving that vision. And we try to combat that and empower them to help us get there 2 different ways. One is we work with them over a 3-day chapter officer retreat. And then another way is that we take a much less direct route and a more long-term effect through their participation in leadership development and career development events. I'm going to talk about those a little bit here in just a second. But when we talk about this officer retreat, I think that's one thing that our program does very well. We take 3 days during the summer, and we take them on an officer retreat. And I know that's not a novel idea, and that's not something that just we do, but it's something that lots of programs do. But I think we do a very good job of it. And there's some reasons why I believe that. One is that everything that we do while we're gone on that event has a purpose. From the time that we step on the bus to the time we step off the bus back at campus, everything that we do has a purpose. For example, when we're driving to the location, every time that I'll stop the bus, students get out of their seat, they have to find a new partner to sit with. This gets them interacting with other members, gets them interacting with other members of their officer team, and then when we get to officer retreat, they'll complete an activity. I had to figure out how well they got to know their officers. When we sit down for meals, there's conversation cards at the table. You'd be surprised at how many of our students don't sit down and have a meal at home, and they don't know how to converse at the table. So we use prompts to help do that. Competitive events, games that they play, have purposes. Sometimes there's processing and application that we discuss after the activity. Sometimes the activities to decide who cooks and cleans the meals. That task itself also has a purpose, and I think there's some value in them spending some time together, learning to cook together, learning to clean together, some team bonding there. In addition to that, they complete activities at officer retreat, obviously to plan the year, but also in terms of their own personal development, speaking skills, facilitation skills, learning how to use a microphone, learning how to introduce people, learning how to interact with people. So everything that we do during that 3-day retreat is very deliberate in their development and their contribution toward achieving our program visions. The second piece to that, overcoming obstacles and empowering them, is their participation in career development and leadership development events. And this is a much longer term activity than the officer retreat, but I think the value in it is that the skills and the knowledge that they attain through participation in those events are transferable to our vision and transferable to whatever they're choosing to do after high school. So those two activities are how we go about overcoming obstacles and empowering students to help achieve that vision. The sixth step in this 8-step process is creating short-term wins. And as I think back to the previous program that I worked in, that's a lot of what we did was create short-term wins. We made a big deal out of things that maybe weren't such a big deal. Awards, chapter awards that pretty much every chapter in the state's going to get, but we made a big deal out of them because it made our students feel that they had achieved something, and they had. We made a big deal out of activities that maybe weren't necessarily be a big deal at other programs that had larger successes. Things like a back-to-school cookout or a chapter tailgate party, we made a big deal out of. Students, we created awards and gave to students SAE of the month, member of the month, those type of awards. Because they really didn't have any awards other than ones that we would create for them when I first came in. So we made a big deal out of things that weren't really a big deal to try to create some confidence and create those short-term wins. You know, I remember competing in a Ag Issues contest at the State FFA Convention my first year teaching, and we were the only school from West Tennessee that competed. But we certainly, and we placed, I think, 7th or 8th in the state, something like that. Wasn't anything to write home about, but we certainly made a big deal out of being the regional champions. Now, we were the only ones from the region in the contest, but other people didn't have to know that. So we created a short-term win there. And that was something that gave our students lots of confidence, and confidence that we transferred later on when they were participating in other events and had bigger wins. During those 4 years I was there, we had a lot of success in the SAE division. We had lots of success with proficiency awards. We had 6 national finalists in 4 years, and actually we had 6 national finalists in 3 years to be more specific, because the first year we actually the first 2 years we didn't have any. So we had a lot of success there. And I think that success is a result of creating some of those short-term wins, because it gave those students some confidence and buy-in to do some of those bigger things later on. So I think that's a very important thing for young teachers, is to find and create those short-term wins. Step 7, as it's described in the text, is consolidating gains. When we talk about consolidating gains, it's stated that it prevents your organization from sliding backwards into its old way of doing things, and instead It works with guiding your coalition. You consolidate the gains from your short-term wins, remove unnecessary interdependencies, implement larger change in the organization. It comes as a momentum for change and counters any continued resistance to change. So step 7 is consolidating those gains. Number 8 is strengthening the culture and anchoring change in the culture. So strengthening the culture and anchoring change within the culture. And I think about the culture of the current ALEC program, Munford High School, that I work at. We have a very strong culture. We have a very strong level of dedication. Our students know what's expected of them. Our students know the expectation for excellence within our program, and they adhere to it, and they thrive on it. And within that culture in our program, we have created an environment where when change is necessary, we make it, and our students know that that flexibility exists as well. I think about, from an FFA perspective, I struggled to get students to participate in events when I was at other schools, and at our school now, they participated. We have alternates. We have more students than what we need, and we talk about their participation within that event. They expect to win. They know what it takes to win, because the students that were there before them won, because the students that were there before them put the work in. They see that work. They know that's the expectation. They put it in. So that culture has really been created. And I think that that's very important in an ALEC program, is creating that culture and that expectation. Within the educational piece, there's lots of places I think that FFA events happen during the school day, and we take pride on it at our school that that's not the case. FFA happens after school. Yes, it's intercurricular, and the skills that we're teaching in class are implemented in those FFA events, but we're not taking class time to coach FFA contests. That happens after school, and that's a culture that's been created in our school. That was created by the teachers that were there before me, and one that we perpetuated, and we're going to continue after I'm gone. I think that when we talk about culture in a program, it's bigger than one person. It's bigger than one group of students. It is the program, and that culture is very, very important. If I could offer advice to any young teacher, I think that that's the most important thing, is creating a culture. And I think it involves several of these other steps, but ultimately that culture in the program is what makes the program successful. So creating a culture is very, very important in my opinion. And I know that change has to be a part of that, because things are going to change, things are going to adapt, things are going to evolve, and you've got to be flexible, and you've got to create that flexibility in your students, so that when those changes are necessary to be made, you can make them and roll with it, and just keep right on going with that sustained level of success. Thanks for listening as I've discussed the 8-step process to creating change for this ALEC 552 class. I think this is a class that I have thoroughly enjoyed, getting to know my classmates, as well as working with Dr. Stevens. One that I have been able to see lots of ways that I can improve the current organization that I work with, Munford FFA, and very excited to see what future classes in ALEC I'm able to take, and what I'm able to gain from those as well. Thank you.